Hearing Wang Lin's promise, Sun Tai gave him a deep look, once again engraving this person, who was tangled with him in old grievances, into his heart. His vision seemed to blur, as if he was transported back hundreds of years to the Renegade Immortal world. Scenes flickered before his eyes, finally settling on the calm, yet slightly aged face before him. Between life and death, it turns out that it's so fleeting. Sun Tai smiled faintly and closed his eyes. The deathly aura around him thickened to its peak in that instant, only to dissipate the next moment, as if it had never been there. Grandpa's son. Wang Ping's eyes welled up with tears as he gazed at Sun Tai's peaceful face, crying out. Wang Lin sighed softly, rubbing Wang Ping's head. A trace of indifference flashed in his eyes, as though he had seen through life and death, through reincarnation. Such matters, like fleeting smoke and clouds, were seen, but not held in the heart. Sun Tai's tomb was located on the back mountain of Falling Moon Village. The deceased villagers were all buried there. The tombstone was engraved by Wang Ping, with the inscription, Tomb of Sun Tai, signed by his adopted grandson, Wang Ping. When Wang Ping was 12 years old, Sun Tai took him in as an adopted grandson, and Wang Lin did not object. After all, Sun Tai was already much older than him, and he was old enough to be Wang Ping's grandfather. As for the relationship between Wang Lin and Sun Tai, they were peers, and just as Wang Ping felt, Sun Tai held a deep respect for Wang Lin, almost to the point of reverence. There was no body in Sun Tai's tomb. His body had been turned into a jar of ashes, stored in Wang Lin's storage pouch. This was his promise to Sun Tai. At 16, Wang Ping was exceptionally handsome, and compared to Wang Lin, he seemed even more youthful. The passage of time had not only taken away Wang Lin's youthful appearance, but also caused the women of the Zhang family in the village to lose interest in matchmaking. Instead, as Wang Ping grew up, their focus shifted to this child. However, Wang Ping, despite his handsome looks, carried a demeanor similar to his father. He was exceptionally calm in his actions, speaking little, but his eyes shone with wisdom. A year after Sun Tai's passing, on this day, in the large courtyard of the Wang residence, Wang Lin held a wooden block in his hands, carving it with great care. Wang Ping sat nearby, calmly watching his father. Wrinkles had appeared on Wang Lin's face, and the marks of time were becoming more apparent. Carving must come from the heart. Each stroke is etched into memory. Only then can one be called a true craftsman, Wang Lin said quietly, not looking up. Wang Ping nodded and picked up a wooden block of his own, beginning to carve. In the setting sun, the father and son's figures were stretched long, their movements nearly identical. Even their expressions mirrored each other. As the sun set, their figures faded, but that subtle charm remained eternal. Have you decided? As the sun finally set, a dark hue enveloped the land. Wang Lin lit a lamp, placing the lampshade on top, and said calmly. Wang Ping, who had been holding a half-finished carving, fell silent. Wang Lin did not rush him. He sat beside him, picking up Wang Ping's carving and inspecting it closely. The sculpture was a bit rough, but it captured about 3 parts of the essence. The carving depicted Sun Tai, with a proud look on his face, his eyes gazing towards the sky. Each of his hands had a unique hand seal, and a strange aura emanated from him. Beneath his feet, clouds gathered, making the carving seem very lifelike. Dad, why don't you let me learn the cultivation techniques that Grandpa's son left behind? Wang Ping lowered his head and asked softly. Wang Lin sighed. In this matter, Sun Tai had never followed his wishes. Instead, he secretly taught Wang Ping cultivation techniques after adopting him as his grandson. All of this could not escape Wang Lin's divine abilities. Had Sun Tai not used up his life force to secretly impart these techniques to Wang Ping, he wouldn't have left 4 years earlier than expected. As a father, Wang Lin was not a dictatorial man. He looked at Wang Ping, who had inherited the looks of his mother, willow eyebrows, and learned his calm demeanor over his 16 years. The gleam of wisdom in his eyes made Wang Lin feel like he was seeing another version of himself. Because the life of a cultivator is not suited for you, Wang Lin said softly, his gaze shifting away. Wang Ping smiled faintly and looked up at his father, saying, Dad, I never cultivated the techniques Grandpa's son taught me. I never have. Wang Lin nodded. He knew this well. Though Sun Tai had taught Wang Ping cultivation methods, Wang Ping had never taken them up. "Dad, you're a cultivator, aren't you?" Wang Ping asked, his head lowered. "I'm not an immortal, just a cultivator." Wang Lin's eyes revealed a trace of sorrow as he slowly spoke. "What you mean is that you want me to live a normal life, not follow in your footsteps and become a cultivator, right?" Wang Ping asked after a brief pause. The bright moon gradually rose, casting its soft light on the earth, and a chill seemed to hang in the air. A gentle breeze blew, making the lampshade sway slightly, causing the candlelight inside to flicker, mixing with the moonlight, enveloping the courtyard. "Yes." Wang Lin put down the carving of Wang Ping, his gaze turning to the night sky, his voice uncertain. "If Pinger doesn't want to." Wang Ping raised his head, looking at his father. This was the first time in his 16 years of life that he spoke to his father like this. Wang Lin's eyes landed on Wang Ping, but he remained silent, merely gazing at him calmly. Time passed slowly. Wang Ping's head gradually lowered, as if he couldn't bring himself to meet his father's gaze. "A lifetime of cultivation is not suited for you. Don't bring it up again." Wang Lin's voice was calm, yet firm. However, in his eyes, where Wang Ping couldn't see, a flash of sorrow passed by, a sorrow, deep and profound. Wang Ping bitterly said, "Yes, father, I will not cultivate." Wang Lin said nothing. He turned and walked back to the house. As his figure entered, his voice drifted out. "Pinger, take your medicine." Wang Ping stood in silence for a long while, then sighed softly and stood up. He walked into the room, his back slightly hunched in resignation. His father's authority had not shown itself outwardly, but in Wang Ping's heart, it loomed large. He had no strength to resist, only the will to follow his father's wishes and live an ordinary life. "Aside from cultivation, I can give you everything in this world." Wang Lin's voice came slowly as Wang Ping lay on his bed after drinking the medicine. Wang Ping closed his eyes, remaining silent. In the darkness, Wang Lin sat alone in the courtyard, staring blankly at the pitch-black distance. Once again, the sorrow in his eyes flickered. The passage of time often felt like the moonlight in this darkness. You couldn't see when it came, and by the time you noticed, it had already spread over the land. 3 years passed since Sun Tai's death. This year, Wang Ping was 19. He had completely transformed into a handsome young man. Though traces of youth remained on his face, they were hard to notice unless one looked closely. His appearance, more and more, resembled willow eyebrows. In contrast, Wang Lin looked much older. 19 years had left deep marks on his face. On the 19th anniversary of Wang Lin's arrival in Falling Moon Village, he packed up his belongings and, with Wang Ping, left. As they departed, childhood friends who had grown up with Wang Ping came to see him off. Most of them were girls, and their eyes were filled with lingering resentment as they looked at him. Among them, especially the second daughter of the Zhou family, looked the most sorrowful. But Wang Ping paid no attention. He had inherited his mother's willow eyebrows, but his temperament, like his father's, was indifferent to women. In the span of 19 years, people in Falling Moon Village had aged, died, and new generations had grown. Of the neighbors who had been there when Wang Lin first arrived, 3 or 4 out of 10 were now gone. The sturdy man from the Zhou family, though still strong, no longer had the energy of youth. He stood next to Wang Lin, reminiscing. "Brother Wang, nearly 20 years have passed in the blink of an eye. I still remember when you brought Pinger here. But now, you're leaving." Wang Lin smiled slightly and replied gently, "Brother Zhou, sorry for causing you trouble these years. But the child has grown up, and it's time to take him out and let him see the world." The man from the Zhou family sighed deeply and looked at Wang Ping, who was surrounded by the village girls in the distance. He smiled wryly. "It seems my second daughter won't have that fortune." Wang Lin shook his head and laughed. "It should be my son who's unlucky." Not far off, Wang Ping, his expression calm, softly said, "Take care." He turned and walked toward Wang Lin. At that moment, one of the girls ran up a few steps, blushing, and called out, "Wang Ping, will you come back?" Wang Ping paused but did not turn around. He softly replied, "I probably won't." The girl's eyes reddened, tears trailing down her cheeks. It seemed she had heard the sound of her own heart breaking. "I hate you, Wang Ping." The girl cried out, turned, and ran away. Wang Ping frowned and walked to his father without saying a word. The man from the Zhou family sighed heavily and cupped his fists toward Wang Lin, saying, "Brother Wang, take care." Wang Lin, who had a fondness for the straightforward man, smiled and said, "Take care." He then turned and walked away. Wang Ping followed behind, but after a few steps, he hesitated, looking back at the girl who was crying and walking further away. He sighed and continued to walk with Wang Lin. "Dad, why are these girls so troublesome, especially that Zhou Ruodong?" Wang Ping caught up with his father, frowning. Wang Lin laughed heartily and glanced back at Wang Ping, whose handsome features, inherited from willow eyebrows, now had a somewhat enchanting charm. "Don't like the Zhou girl's company," Wang Lin said with a half-smile. "I don't like her, but when she cried earlier, I felt a bit reluctant." Wang Ping sighed. On Renegade Star, amidst the famous mountains, one could always spot a father and son duo. They scaled peaks, stood atop them, and gazed at the world below. They observed the changes in the sky, watched the layers of clouds intertwining. The vast earth seemed to shrink in their eyes, as though they could see its end with a single glance. Especially when they reached the highest peaks, where the powerful winds howled, Wang Ping stood firm against the wind, looking at the heavens and earth, his spirit seemingly cleansed and continuously elevated. As they climbed one peak after another, his once frail body began to gain strength. To Wang Ping, everything his father did was remarkable, whether it was the peace of the past 20 years or the present challenge of defying the heavens. After crossing peak after peak, Wang Ping's mind expanded beyond what he had ever known. It was as if he had forgotten everything, lost in the vastness of the world around him. Accompanied only by his father, the mountains, waters, sky, and earth seemed to recognize his presence, reflecting his essence in nature itself. There was no loneliness, only a freedom of the soul. No matter how dangerous the peaks, father and son pressed on. No matter how towering the mountains, they crossed them with ease. Though Wang Ping's body was that of a mortal, his spirit had been elevated through each of these experiences. He had reached a new height. From the mountains, he gained insights into life. From each challenge, he solidified his heart. Through each distant gaze at the world, he felt the grandeur of it all. But he never stopped, never succumbed to its might. Instead, with every climb, he inherited his father Wang Lin's defiant will. Though Wang Lin never taught Wang Ping the ways of cultivation, he had, in his own way, struck deep into Wang Ping's soul, pushing it to new heights. When thirsty, they drank from mountain springs. When hungry, they ate fruits from beasts. When tired, they sat on the ground. When sleepy, they lay beneath the sky, using it as a blanket. 3 years passed quickly. During this time, Wang Ping's respect for his father grew even stronger. To him, his father was the greatest person in the world. Having conquered the mountains, they now faced the rivers. At various rivers, the father and son's figures could also be seen, gazing at the mighty waters, listening to the roar that seemed to defy the heavens. A lone boat carried Wang Ping's vision and his increasingly elevated spirit. Amidst the rivers and crashing waves, they pressed forward, continually challenging themselves. This great river, which encircled most of Renegade Star, was filled with the traces of Wang Lin and his son. Wang Ping's laughter echoed more frequently, accompanied by his father's hearty laughter. Such laughter was rare from Wang Lin. It was almost as though his laughter carried a contagious energy, making Wang Ping even happier. It seemed that as long as his father was by his side, he needed nothing else in this world. "Father, I will stay by your side for all my life. Even in death, if there is a next life, even if we are no longer father and son, I will never forget you." Wang Ping's voice was resolute as he spoke amidst the river. The lone boat sailed away, journeying across the majority of Renegade Star, heading toward the ocean's entrance. The land journey ended, but the sea voyage was just beginning. A sea vessel sailed, breaking through the waves. The sea breeze swept through, and Wang Ping's world expanded infinitely. He saw islands and waves, watched heavenly thunder strike the sea, sending bolts of lightning across the sky. He saw a giant whale, as large as a village, and even glimpsed a mirage. The vastness of the sea far surpassed the land. Wang Ping's eyes grew brighter, feeling the sea's embrace, which seemed as vast and grand as his father's heart. Embracing the endless sea, the sharpness of the mountains, and the vast rivers, he felt the grandness of the heavens and earth. 5 years later, when Wang Lin and his son returned to land, Wang Ping had undergone a transformation. Though he was still immortal, his spirit could now contain the entire world. When they returned, the last mountain they crossed was Qilian Peak, near Falling Moon Village. At 27, Wang Ping's youthful innocence had vanished. In its place, there was a resolute expression. His appearance, shaped by 8 years of experience, had driven away any trace of strangeness. All that remained was unparalleled handsomeness. His sharp, handsome face was graced with a smile as bright as the sun and eyes that sparkled with clarity. Looking at Wang Ping before him, Wang Lin smiled. These 8 years were a method he had long thought of to completely rid Wang Ping's soul of resentment. The pills of willow eyebrows and Wang Lin's divine abilities could only disperse most of the resentful energy, but the resentment was too deep, having already fused with the soul, becoming deeply rooted. The 20 years of peace had gradually mellowed this resentment, and the 8 years of spiritual purification had further sublimated Wang Ping's soul, causing the resentment in his soul to be almost entirely purged without his knowing, leaving only a trace behind. This trace, however, could not be eliminated by any magic or pill. It could only be erased in the cycle of reincarnation. At the foot of Qilian Peak, Wang Lin gazed at the distant mountain village and softly said, "Don't you want to take a look?" Beside him, Wang Ping shook his head and said, "No, I won't go." Wang Lin didn't speak further and instead stepped toward the peak. Wang Ping followed closely, catching up to his father's pace, and smiled. "Father, I remember when I was young, I heard someone say that on Qilian Peak, there is a mortal mist, and taking a breath of it can keep one from falling ill for 10 years. At that time, I wondered when father would take me here." Wang Lin smiled and gave a gentle look at Wang Ping. This tall Qilian mountain was gradually climbed to the summit by the father and son, and at the peak, countless clouds floated, making it seem as though they were stepping on the mist. Wang Ping took a deep breath and looked at his father. To him, though Qilian mountain seemed majestic, it could never compare to his father. Though this mountain was tall, it could never surpass the height of his father's back. In the distance, the clouds turned dark, and flashes of lightning darted through, with occasional thunder rolling. The might of the heavens captured Wang Ping's attention. Soon, as the thunder grew louder, a gust of wet wind blew in, and rain slowly began to fall onto the earth. As the dark clouds spread, the rain gradually intensified. On the earth, it seemed that it hadn't rained in a long time. Dust clouds were kicked up, but before they could rise too high, they were soaked by the hurried rainfall, blending into the raindrops and returning to the ground. It was as if a person cultivating against the heavens, initially destined to ascend to the skies, but under the might of the heavenly power turned into raindrops, had no choice but to fall back down. In this restricted rainfall, how much of the dust could truly ascend? The thunderstorms surged rapidly, but the father and son on the mountain peak remained calm as they gazed at the heavens and earth. The rain, though torrential in the lower world, didn't fall on them at all. Other than the thunder and the swish of the rain, there was no other sound. The thunderstorm came quickly and left just as quickly. Soon, the clouds dispersed, and a rainbow, like a banner across the sky, appeared before the father and son. The rainbow was beautiful and colorful, with 7 hues that, seen at such a close distance, seemed to contain the will of the heavens. However, at this moment, the peaceful scene was disturbed by a howling sound. A sword light whistled through the heavens and earth, like thunder roaring, seemingly trying to shatter the rainbow, passing through it. In the sword light stood a middle-aged man, his aura as if made of immortal wind and bones, and an aura of immortality enveloped him. Under his feet, a green flying sword emitted bursts of cold radiance. As he soared, his gaze immediately fell upon Wang Lin and his son at the top of Qilian Peak. He let out a soft exclamation. For mortals to climb to such heights was no ordinary feat. They must possess great perseverance. A look of admiration appeared in the man's eyes, but he didn't stop. Instead, he leaped over the peak and rushed towards the distance. Wang Ping stared blankly as the middle-aged man disappeared into the horizon. This was the first time he had witnessed such a scene, and the shock in his heart was like a raging tide, not calming for a long time. "Father, is this an immortal?" Wang Ping muttered. Wang Lin sighed lightly and slowly said, "Yes." Wang Ping fell silent. After a long while, he raised his head, gazed at his father, and spoke in a soft voice. "Father, really can't I cultivate?" Wang Lin's gaze fell upon the rainbow that was slowly dissipating in the distance, and a hint of sadness once again appeared in his eyes. He didn't speak, only shaking his head. Wang Ping didn't say anything further, but stared blankly at the place where the middle-aged cultivator had disappeared. Descending from Qilian Peak, Wang Ping remained silent all the way. Walking along the official road, they eventually arrived at a nearby town and boarded the carriage to the great city. Wang Ping still didn't speak a word. Except for the coachman, the carriage held only the father and son. Wang Lin's gaze turned to the outside through the window, and within his eyes, the sorrow deepened, mixed with a trace of unspoken bitterness. The carriage was silent. After a long while, Wang Ping lowered his head and softly said, "Father, I want to cultivate." This was the second time he had said he wanted to cultivate. The first time was 10 years ago, when he was 17. Wang Lin did not retract his gaze and continued to look outside, calmly saying, "You are not suited for cultivation." "Father, what?" Wang Ping asked, unwilling to accept, as he gazed at his father's side profile. Wang Lin turned his head, as he did 10 years ago, and said nothing. He simply gazed at Wang Ping quietly. The sound of the carriage wheels pressing against the ground slowly echoed, carrying the passage of time. Eventually, Wang Ping lowered his head and softly said, "I understand, father." No one knew the true reason why he wouldn't allow Wang Ping to cultivate. Sun Tai didn't know, Wang Ping didn't know. Only Wang Lin himself understood the root of it all. He couldn't bring himself to speak to Wang Ping about it. For Wang Ping's sake, he couldn't. This had nothing to do with the death of Willow Eyebrows. The sigh in his heart, Wang Ping could not hear. His gaze fell on the vast fields outside the carriage window, as Wang Lin remained silent. Inside the carriage, Wang Ping was equally quiet. The silence between father and son grew heavier and more profound with each passing moment. After a long time, Wang Ping turned his head and looked at his father. From the side, he could see that his father's wrinkles had deepened. A feeling of guilt rose in his heart, and he whispered, "Father, I was wrong." Wang Lin turned around, offering a kind smile, but said nothing. Qishui City was one of the deputy capitals of the Great Qin Empire on Ranyan Star, second only to the capital in its prosperity. Its proximity to rivers made it a bustling place. The carriage rushed into the city and stopped at a post station. Wang Lin and his son disembarked and made their way into the lively city. This bustling metropolis was unlike anything Wang Ping had ever seen. As he looked around, it was as if the unpleasantness of the past had been completely forgotten. In the east of the city, in a rather luxurious restaurant, Wang Lin stepped inside. The waiters hurried over, greeting them with smiles and guiding the father and son to a corner by the window. Soon, food and drinks were brought to their table. Perhaps because Wang Ping was so strikingly handsome, he immediately drew the attention of many women in the hall. Wang Ping had long grown accustomed to this sort of attention during his youth in the village. Wang Lin did not touch his chopsticks. Instead, he picked up his wine and took a sip, his expression calm. Wang Ping also merely took a small taste. "From now on, we will live here. Later, we will buy a house." Wang Lin set down his cup and said casually. Wang Ping nodded, smiling. "Father, this place is quite nice. I've grown used to the mountains and seas, but seeing this lively city gives me a strange feeling, like I've entered the world again." Just as Wang Ping finished speaking, a mocking laugh came from a nearby table. There were 3 people seated at the table, an elderly man with silver hair and a majestic air. Though his eyes were somewhat dim, every movement exuded an aristocratic presence. Beside him were 2 others, a man and a woman. The man was remarkably handsome and poised, dressed in purple robes with gold thread embroidery, appearing highly distinguished. The woman, in her 20s, had long black hair cascading like a waterfall. While not extraordinarily beautiful, she carried a certain elegance. The mocking laugh came from the young man in purple robes. "This foolish boy is quite amusing. Perhaps it's his first time in Qishui City. He's flaunting some knowledge about mountains and waters, As if he's been out of the world for so long, the young man chuckled to the woman beside him. His words were not whispered, and they reached Wang Ping's ears clearly. Wang Ping frowned, but said nothing. As for Wang Lin, he merely took another sip of his wine, casually glancing at the three sitting at the table. The woman furrowed her brows lightly and softly said, "Is it funny?" The young man grinned. "Senior Sister Qing, why wouldn't it be funny?" A trace of annoyance flickered in the woman's eyes as she turned her head away. The young man snorted coldly. His ridicule of Wang Ping had been intentional, especially after noticing that the usually indifferent woman had, for the first time, lifted her head to glance at Wang Ping. Given his status, if it weren't for this woman, he wouldn't have bothered dining here. Seeing her reaction now, he turned his attention back to Wang Ping. "With such looks, if you were a woman, you'd be an unparalleled beauty. Unfortunately, you're a man, such a waste. But perhaps being a courtesan suits you," the young man said in a measured tone. His repeated provocations caused Wang Ping to set down his chopsticks. He turned to face the young man and calmly said, "What a grand appearance. If you were human, you'd be a fine gentleman, but sadly, you're nothing more than a beast. What a pity." The young man's expression darkened, but before he could speak, the elderly man beside him frowned and barked. "Since when did the Serene Elegance Pavilion allow such people to enter? Completely uncultured. Let me help teach your elders a lesson." As the old man spoke, he flicked his chopsticks with a swift motion. In an instant, they shot toward Wang Ping, aiming for his shoulders. If struck, Wang Ping's arms would be crippled for life. The moment the chopsticks flew, the woman beside him gave a soft gasp and stood up, as if intending to chase after them. However, as the chopsticks neared, they seemed to lose all momentum and gently fell beside Wang Ping. Wang Lin's eyes flashed with cold light. He set down his wine pot and lifted his gaze to coldly regard the elderly man. One glance. The elderly man with gray hair trembled all over, as if countless thunderclaps exploded in the young man's mind, filling the air. The gaze from his opponent was like a sharp sword, crazily piercing through his eyes, breaking apart his mental state and engraving itself on his soul. It felt as if his soul essence was being scattered, as though the fire of his golden pill was about to be extinguished and his core shattered. The man stiffened instantly, as if struck by a powerful bolt of lightning. His hands and feet trembled uncontrollably. This is... The old man's mind shook violently, his scalp tingling. A sharp pain surged in the center of his forehead, as though his gaze had been pierced through. The sound of his frantic heartbeat echoed within him, nearly causing his body to collapse. His whole body turned icy cold, as if he were naked and facing an enemy. In that moment, everything about him was shattered by a single gaze. A mouthful of blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, with a faint golden hue mixed in. His golden pill cracked, and the pill's energy leaked into his blood vessels. This old man was a cultivator, a golden pill cultivator. As for the young man in purple, he was only a chi refining cultivator, and the woman had yet to establish her foundation. If a golden pill cultivator could act so viciously towards a mere mortal, then Wang Lin would not hesitate for a moment to eliminate the threat. Moreover, this old man had offended his son. The chair the old man was sitting on shattered with a loud crack, and he fell to the ground, pale. He quickly retrieved a pill from his storage pouch and swallowed it, then immediately shattered the communication jade slip. The tavern fell silent. Many of the guests were still confused, but some quick-witted individuals immediately got up and hurriedly paid their bills to leave. The young man in purple stood frozen in place, not even glancing at the old man. Instead, his gaze darkened, locking onto Wang Lin and his son. As for the woman, her expression changed, and she stared blankly at Wang Ping and Wang Lin, clearly unable to comprehend the sudden turn of events. "My son, Wang Lin, needs no teaching from you." Wang Lin withdrew his gaze and took a sip from the wine jug. At this moment, he was relying on the pill he had swallowed earlier to slow the draining of his pill's energy, though the effect was minimal. Spiritual energy radiated from his body like a thin mist. The young man in purple stared at Wang Lin and nodded, saying, "I didn't expect you to be a cultivator as well." "Very well, in this Ranyan star, offending the Sun family is as good as..." Before he could finish, Wang Lin waved his right hand. The young man's body trembled violently. His face instantly drained of color, and he collapsed to the ground. Wang Lin didn't kill him. The young man's spiritual energy was minimal, still within the realm of a mortal. From Wang Lin's experience, it was clear that this young man, if not a direct descendant of some powerful cultivator, must have a noble status among mortals. As for the Golden Pill Elder and the woman named Qingyi, it was evident they were master and disciple. But regardless of their identities, Wang Lin paid them no mind. In this Ranyan star, he was the supreme ancestor. At this moment, Wang Ping took a deep breath, looking at his father. It suddenly dawned on him that his father was no ordinary cultivator. A single glance was enough to break the elder apart. Clearly, he was extraordinary. Qingyi, standing nearby, stared blankly at the Wang father and son. After a moment of hesitation, she took 2 steps forward and respectfully said, "Senior, this matter was our recklessness." Wang Lin picked up the wine jug and took another sip, not even glancing at her. Qingyi bit her lower lip, caught in a dilemma. Just then, Wang Ping smiled slightly. He was already quite handsome, but with that smile, he appeared even more exceptional. He looked at Qingyi and said, "Is your name Qingyi, miss? I am Wang Ping. Are you perhaps a cultivator as well?" Wang Ping's smile caused Qingyi's face to flush. She softly responded, "Yes, but my master said that if one has not reached foundation establishment, they should not call themselves a cultivator. You are Wang Ping. Today's events are our fault, but you should leave soon. My master has already shattered the communication jade slip, and someone will likely be here soon." Wang Ping smiled faintly, showing no concern for the matter, and began conversing with Qingyi. At that moment, a loud howling sound suddenly came from outside the tavern. A fierce wind blew through, and 3 elderly figures abruptly walked into the tavern. Ancestor son, Qingyi hurriedly showed respect. Among the 3 elders, one had white hair and piercing eyes like lightning. His mere presence exuded an awe-inspiring force. As he entered the tavern, his gaze swept across the Golden Pill cultivator sitting cross-legged on the floor, then shifted to Wang Lin and his son. In his eyes, Wang Lin was just a mortal, with no trace of spiritual energy. But the young man opposite him caught his attention. The elder's gaze lingered, and he examined the young man closely, a strange look appearing in his eyes. This child has exceptional talent. Although his body is ordinary, his soul seems to contain the vastness of heaven and earth, filled with immense power. Few cultivators can reach this level in terms of mental cultivation. These 2 are not as simple as they seem. At this moment, the core formation cultivator sitting cross-legged on the ground seemed to sense the old man's arrival. He opened his eyes, and an uncontrollable surge of elixir energy spilled out. He let out a pained grunt as a thick mist enveloped him. His face turned pale, and he urgently exclaimed, "Uncle, it was him who harmed me. Save me." He pointed forcefully at Wang Lin. The old man formed a hand seal with his right hand, and a spirit technique darted out, flashing like lightning and landing between his eyebrows. As soon as the seal settled, it rapidly expanded, creating a net that temporarily trapped the elixir energy escaping from the core formation cultivator. After completing this, he cast a grim look at Wang Lin and said, "You have acted so ruthlessly. Do you think the Sun family has no one to stand against you?" Wang Lin didn't even glance at him. He put down his wine flask and replied flatly, "Pinger, let's go." With that, he stood up and walked towards the exit of the tavern. Wang Ping flashed a slight smile at Qingyi, causing her face to blush as she quickly lowered her head. Wang Ping felt a fondness for the girl named Qingyi, stemming from her earlier attempt to intervene when her master unleashed a powerful attack. Rising from his seat, Wang Ping followed his father out. The old man snorted coldly and stepped forward to block their path, with 2 other elders behind him doing the same. "Speak clearly before you leave." Wang Lin's gaze remained indifferent as he casually stepped forward. This seemingly simple move struck the hearts of the 3 elders like a thunderclap, as if he was not stepping on the ground, but rather on their very spirits. The 2 elders behind the old man had reached the mid-nascent soul stage, but their expressions changed dramatically. Instinctively, they channeled their spiritual power and took several steps back. This was neither an incantation nor a supernatural power, and not even a hint of immortal energy emanated from Wang Lin. Yet to the three elders, what they felt far surpassed anything they had ever seen in terms of techniques. It was a kind of momentum that could only be displayed by someone who had reached the level of a grandmaster. Those who possessed Tao thought seemed to create their own realm, drawing upon the power of heaven and earth as their aura. Not only were the three elders unable to resist, but even ordinary peak cultivators would find it impossible to contend with. The old man was the strongest, having achieved a perfect late nascent soul stage, and was in the midst of comprehending the Tao. He was already half a step into spirit transformation, and Wang Lin's aura struck him deeply, as if his soul had been jolted by the other's step. His face turned pale, and he staggered back 2 steps. Wang Lin walked past him and exited the tavern, followed closely by Wang Ping. Just before leaving, he turned back to cast a gentle smile at Qingyi. Her face flushed even more. Only this once, there won't be a next time. Wang Lin's voice drifted from outside the tavern, reaching the ears of the Sun family cultivators. It took them a long time to regain their composure, their eyes filled with shock. Once outside the tavern, Wang Ping hesitated for a moment before catching up to his father. Dad, do you know the Sun family? There's some history there. I once promised to provide them protection for 100 years. Wang Lin replied honestly, withholding only the true reason for not letting his son pursue cultivation. About that girl named Qingyi, she seems nice. Wang Lin gave Wang Ping a half-smile. Wang Ping was taken aback, his handsome face flushed with uncommon embarrassment. In the northern part of Qishui City, Wang Lin and his son purchased a spacious private courtyard. After a thorough cleaning, they settled in. The courtyard was large, with several rooms. The previous owner had left behind some maids and servants when selling the house. Meanwhile, back at the Sun family's branch in Qishui City, Wang Lin's final remark had stirred up a tremendous uproar.